If you want to get heavier sounds out of your guitar but don't want to down-tune, there are loads of ways to achieve it, and these are two of my personal favourites. The first is to start using chord inversions. Don't worry if you're not big on music theory, the concept is simple. A chord inversion just means reordering the notes of a chord so that the root note is no longer the lowest in pitch. An easy way to demonstrate this is with power chords, since they're one of the most common shapes you'll use. Take a D5 chord. It's made up of the root note D, 5th fret on the A string, and the 5th and A, 7th fret on the D string. Now technically a power chord only has 2 notes, so it doesn't really have an inversion in the traditional sense, but you can still swap which note is in the bass to create a similar effect. To do this, you can find another D note higher up on the neck so that the root note is no longer the lowest note. If you know your octave shapes starting on the A string, you'll know you can find a higher D 2 strings down and 3 frets across, giving you this kind of inverted D5. However, this doesn't really make the chord sound heavier. Instead of moving the root note up, try doing the opposite with the 5th. Move the A down in pitch so it becomes the bass note. This still gives you a D5 chord, but with A in the bass. You can even keep the original A on the D string, which altogether creates a thicker, grungy sound. This shape is then movable across the fretboard, just like with a regular power chord, and is a great way to get a drop tuning style sound while staying in standard tuning. Here's a comparison using a progression of C#5, D5 and A5, first with regular power chord shapes, then with the 5th note in the bass. The second approach builds on the idea of inversions, but focuses more on the relationship between the guitar and bass. A common voicing you'll hear in rock and punk, especially skate punk, is a first inversion, where the third of the chord is played in the bass, meaning it's the lowest note in terms of pitch. This shape will likely be very familiar to anyone who listens to bands on Fat Wreck chords.
You put on Survivor, and I put on some headphones.
The principle is the same as with the power chords from the previous example. If you invert a partial G major chord by placing the B, the third, in the bass, you get a G over B. Rather than using that partial G shape, I'll be using this voicing instead. But I wanted to show this first because understanding where the inversion comes from helps when arranging your bass line around the guitar. In this next progression, I'm mostly alternating between this first inversion style shape and a regular power chord, starting with the voicing played on the 2nd fret of the A string and the 5th fret of the D string. Normally, the bass would follow the guitar, so if the guitar plays G over B, the bass plays B. If it plays A over C sharp, the bass plays C sharp, and so on. That, along with an added drum groove, sounds like this. But the second technique starts here. By tweaking the bass line, you can make the part sound heavier without changing your guitar chords. Since the guitar is playing the third in the bass is free to play the lower root note instead. This gives each instrument its own space, helping the bass and guitar stay out of each other's way. In this second example, I've embellished the bass line a little more. When the guitar is playing the inversion, the bass starts on the root, moves to the third, which we know the guitar is emphasizing, then returns back to the root. For the regular power chords, the bass plays a root, then drops to the 5th below it, adding extra weight without muddying the sound. As you heard, this pattern repeats all the way up until I reach the passing chord, a G5, where I drop to D in the bass, which is the fifth of G5. Then, while the guitar plays a C5 with G in the bass, followed by a partial G major, the bass plays the root note of each chord lower down, with a small hammer-on between changes for added movement. As for which one is better, that's entirely dependent on your arrangement and the sound you're going for. But just for fun, here's a back-to-back comparison of the two. Pay close attention to the relationship between the guitar and bass, especially how it changes when the bass isn't playing the same note as the guitar's bass note. Those are two quick and easy ways to add extra heaviness to your chords, even in standard tuning. Another approach is layering your guitar parts, which I cover in more detail in this video.